From expectations ahead of the Premier making a televised address to the government's plan for addressing classroom complexity and the go-ahead for Corb Lund's anti-coal petition. Time now for tonight's politics panel. And joining us this evening, Marg McCuaig-Boyd, former MLA and cabinet minister, and Rob Breakenridge is a writer, broadcaster, and columnist for the Calgary Herald. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with word the Premier will take to the airwaves this week. While specifics have yet to be released, Danielle Smith is set to deliver a televised address on Thursday. It comes ahead of the start of the spring sitting next week and delivery of the provincial budget. That's a week from Thursday. The Premier last took to the airwaves in May of last year, addressing Albertans on the province's path forward with the federal government, an address that came in the wake of the Carney Liberals winning the federal election. Marg, how much do you expect this to be about bracing Albertans for what's to come in the budget?
I expect it will be a lot about that. She already has foreshadowed that, it's going to be a bit of an austerity budget coming. So I think she's going to maybe go deeper into why that'll be. And she may make a statement about the separation referenda that are coming.
Well, on that point, Rob, with so much focus right now on the issue of separation, the petition that is pushing for such, should there be an expectation the Premier address that issue?
Yeah, I think there is. I'm not sure we're going to hear it in this address, mind you. I mean, I think Albertans are probably looking to hear something from her as more people become aware of what's going on, and they're hearing about this petition that's underway and a lot of questions, I guess, about where this is all going. And the Premier has basically said she's going to stay out of this until after that whole process plays out. I think maybe at some level they're kind of hoping that it fails, and then this can all kind of go away by itself. But that's unlikely to happen. So I'm not sure if we'll hear much from the Premier yet on this issue, but I do think a lot of Albertans might be tuning in based on that kind of an expectation. They're looking for some clarification. But in the meantime, I think Margaret's right. They're setting the stage for a bad news budget. So we see where oil prices are at. We've seen where spending is at coming off the last budget. And there's all kinds of pressure. I mean, I'm sure we'll touch on education. We've gone through weeks or even months of hearing these horror stories of just how under pressure the hospital system is. So there's a lot that the Alberta government needs to address. And they're going to be really hamstrung when it comes to making any kinds of those big decisions. So I think this is about trying to level with Albertans about that.
Marg, maybe one more on this, on that point of clarification. If she were to address contention over the separation issue, what would you be looking to hear from the Premier?
I guess just maybe more clarification of where it's at, and maybe the government, side of things. And I know she has said she'd stay out of it, but I think there's a lot of uncertainty being cast, certainly for investments. So I think she'd want to make some statements that would bring comfort to some investors. But I think Rob's right a lot. We'll probably tune in hoping she'll say something, but I think the main focus will be on the budget and preparing us for a bad news budget.
All right. Up next, we heard from Alberta Teachers Association President Jason Schilling off the top, and the government rolling out the start of a plan to contend with classroom complexity challenges. Rob, how do you see this plan landing shy of 4 months since all the turmoil around the teacher strike?
Well, I mean, the Alberta government needed to do something. I mean, that was part of imposing the settlement, was to say, yeah, we're forcing the teachers back to work, but we do intend to try to address some of these issues. So, they needed to announce something. I mean, it's, I suppose, a step in the right direction. I mean, clearly the teachers feel it falls well short of what's needed. But really, ultimately, what's needed is beyond just one simple announcement. I mean, we're in a situation where we don't have enough schools, we don't have enough teachers, and so all of these complexity issues continue to mount. Having these teams or devoting a bit of resources that might make a little bit of a difference, but I think trying to address this in a meaningful sense is going to take something much larger than this announcement. And again, that gets back to whether the Alberta government's in a position to do so, given what we're likely to hear about the budget. So I think it was a case of needing to address this and realizing, too, that a lot of that public sentiment was sympathetic to teachers and what they were having to deal with. So I think the Alberta government wants to show that they're listening or they're responding, but I don't know how meaningful it is.
Marg, as a former cabinet minister and someone who has a background as well in education, if memory serves correct, what do you make of the direction the government is taking here with this plan to address classroom complexity?
Well, they did make a promise when they forced teachers to go back that they would look at it. The money seems pretty little to what they want to address. And as a former K-9 and K-12 principal, I jumped immediately to how is that going to work in rural Alberta? It's going to be very difficult. I guess the devil's in the details, but it's going to be very difficult to use that money in rural Alberta. I guess it's, again, up to the school boards, but it's not very much money to address a huge issue that's been, created over a number of years. So I hope it's a good start, but I hope there's more to come.
Rob, you brought up the budget coming down next week as being a factor here. How much of a direction do you see this plan setting for the government's approach to investment in public education? You wrote in the column in the Calgary Herald today about what's following in the wake of the petition that pushed back on public funding of private schools.
Yeah, and I think the Alberta government's put itself in a tough spot. I mean, I think you can defend their approach to choice in education. And look, I think if you had an influx of students coming from private or independent schools back into the public system, it might exacerbate some of these issues we're facing, at least in the short term. But I think the Alberta government, I mean, if they want to make it a priority, they can address public education. I think the way they're likely to frame this, in the face of probably what's going to be a pretty considerable deficit, is that they're continuing down this path, that there is going to be infrastructure money there. There's going to be talk of building new schools. I mean, the timeline's really going to be key. How long is all of this going to take? Where might we see new schools built? But the pressure's there. The need is there. The need was probably there a long time ago. So I think you're going to see an Alberta government that, at least on the surface, is going to say to Albertans, look, we get it. We're taking steps in this direction in terms of both building schools and hiring teachers, but is it going to be enough? And how fast can they do all of that?
All right, time for us to take a bit of a break. But when we come back, the go-ahead for Corb Lund to begin collecting signatures for his anti-coal petition. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. Country singer Corb Lund's petition effort to outlaw new coal mining on the eastern slopes has been given the go-ahead to gather signatures.
The whole 6 years, what the government's tack on this has been to say, oh, okay, Alberta, we've heard you. We understand your concerns. We'll fix it. And then they don't fix it. They leave big loopholes in it. So we've worded our question extremely specifically to make sure that we include Grassy Mountain and any coal projects on the slopes of the Rockies, because it's a terrible idea economically and ecologically.
The petition effort, which calls on the government to introduce legislation prohibiting any new mining activity, has 4 months now to collect nearly 178,000 signatures. If successful, the government would then pass a coal mining ban or send the issue to a province-wide vote. Rob, surprised to see Corb Lund continuing to pursue this, given it's gone through months of setbacks, including a reapplication process after being retroactively cancelled through amended legislation in December.
Yeah, it's taken a lot of patience to navigate all of this. But look, I mean, he's pretty committed to this, and I think a lot of people are. I mean, this has been a big issue for some time, so the opportunity to bring it to the forefront in this way, I don't think they want to let that opportunity slide by, even though there's been a lot that they've had to navigate, and it's I'm sure been pretty confusing and frustrating for them at times as the province has kind of moved these goalposts and these parameters. Here's the thing, though. I think when we saw the Forever Canadian petition, the Thomas Lukaszuk petition, blow past even the old threshold, maybe it set unrealistic expectations for how achievable this is. We've seen more recently with some of these recall petitions, now just last week with this public or private school funding petition, that it is a challenge to do this, that you need a real framework in place and a lot of committed volunteers to make this happen. So even though the threshold has been lowered, it's still quite a hill to climb to get these signatures within that time frame. And this is an issue that I think is a little more regionally specific in Alberta. So for folks in the big cities or folks in northern Alberta, are they connected to this issue? Do they understand all of it? Because I think in a vague or abstract sense, the idea of jobs and economic activity, that can carry a lot of weight with people who are sort of on the periphery of this. So the challenge, I think, for Corb Lund and those on his side is really getting out and educating and explaining all of this to Albertans.
On that point, Mark, how much momentum do you see this initiative needing to generate if it is to be successful, especially at a time when there is so much attention focused on the pro-separatist petition?
Yeah, I think there is maybe a concern about petition fatigue right now, and we've gone through the Thomas Akasik one, and keep public money and public education and that. But I have to say, I live in Edmonton, and I know 3 or 4 people already signed up for this, and there's a lot of talk in here in this area about this petition coming up, and I think it's because Corb is well known and he is so committed. So I wouldn't be surprised that he gets a good chunk of signatures, hopefully enough, but he's bringing some good profile to the issue. So I guess it remains to be seen.
All right, let's squeeze in one more topic. That is on the trade front with the required joint CUSMA review coming in July. The Prime Minister has announced he's tapped longtime senior public servant Janice Charette to be Canada's next chief trade negotiator to the United States, a move that's being welcomed.
She's an incredibly experienced and seasoned bureaucrat and diplomat. This is exactly what we need.
Charette will work closely with Mark Wiseman, there he is. No, that's Mark Carney. Mark Wiseman, Canada's new ambassador to the U.S. The announcement comes as hundreds of Canadian delegates take part in the biggest trade mission to Mexico in decades, led by Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc. Mark, where the appointment of Charette is concerned, what kind of weight is going to rest on her shoulders as chief negotiator with that CUSMA review coming up in July? That's all of 5 months away.
I'm sure it's going to feel like the weight of the world on her, but she certainly has the background and the experience to tackle this matter. And I shouldn't say I've seen the odd negative comment, but by and large, there's a whole bunch of positive comments from all political areas about how competent she is. So it looks like the Prime Minister has picked a good one, but it's no small task that she's going to be facing.
Well, and Rob, are there lessons for Charette to learn from what Chrystia Freeland experienced in leading the way through negotiations that navigated the way to the initial CUSMA agreement?
Well, sure. I think there's a roadmap there on how to deal with all of this. I think at the same time, there needs to be a recognition that, things have changed. It's Donald Trump 2.0, and, it's a different kind of world. So even if you've got some progress or even some actual commitments, the next day or the next week, all of that could be out the window. So I think they need to keep all of that in mind. I think you do see from the Carney government now sort of a broadening of horizons here. And word this week that, Canada is looking to sort of bridge the gap between the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the European Trading Bloc. Canada has both of those trade agreements, and to try to bring all of those together, and Canada could play a key role in that. And I think from Alberta's perspective, that brings energy back to the forefront. Are we able to export more to Asia? Are we able to export more to Europe? And energy's front and center and all of that, as is energy infrastructure like pipelines. So, there's this whole big trade file that Mark Carney's having to navigate right now, and you've got a very unpredictable U.S. trading partner and the potential maybe to build some of these relationships abroad. So it's a lot for him to balance and juggle right now.
And Marg, where this week's huge trade mission to Mexico is concerned, what do you think success is going to need to look like? Should this be an opportunity to make business contacts, or should Canadians see deals being done?
I think you'll see deals being done because, certainly in Alberta, we've been going to Mexico for a number of years through the energy industry. And this isn't a first contact with Mexico. We've been working with them over time. And I know in the case of Alberta, Mexico sits on some huge, rich assets of energy, but they don't have the technology or the know-how to extract them, efficiently. And so it's good news that they're going, I think, for our energy industry and the people who support it. So I think you'll see some deals done.
All right. Folks, I think we'll have to leave it there for time. Good to see you both. Thank you kindly for this.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks.